Namaskar and a very good evening to all of you. A very warm welcome to this episode and a webinar from Kotak Neo. And this one will be a quite an exciting one because we have covered a lot of ground on bullion, on macroeconomics, on energy. But this webinar will focus squarely on base metals. And base metals has been in I would say it's kind of a talk of the town. It's volatile. It's making a lot of news, and MCX prices have gone up almost 30-40% over the last couple of months. So what's really driving this market? And it's just not a couple of months story. The last 1 year has been stellar in the best metals market from copper, aluminium, zinc. Nickel has been quiet. Lead has seen some up move, but overall एक काफी बड़ा एक bull run है, and this in this entire run हम लोग बोल सकते हैं kind of a छुपा रुस्तम has been the aluminium market जो last year काफी शांत था. इस बार it has become extremely volatile and quite violent. There are a lot of reports which are there in the public domain. Some are bearish, some are bullish. But we would actually like to know पहला कि हो क्या रहा है in this market and how we as both traders and investors, because a number of you will be also investors who will be investing through the equity market, जो metal companies है, जो metal miners है, जो उनके stocks में आप invest करते हो. That is one kind of people. Then there are people who basically speculate through the MCX futures in copper, aluminium, zinc, nickel and lead. तो इसके बारे में आज बात करने के लिए we have two fantastic experts. We have first Mr. Sunil Katke. He is the head of retail business in commodities in Kotak Neo. He's going to give you a flavor as to कि exchange में क्या opportunities है in the base metal market. And then we have our special guest, Mr. Chandrasekhar, जो आज बात करेंगे about the dynamics which is shaping this market. What are the factors which has caused this bull run over the last 1 year, especially over the last 3 months? Or what is the outlook forward? 1 साल, 3 साल, या 4 साल. So we will be covering a diverse set of things. So without any delay, I will just invite my colleague, Mr. Katke, to take the stage and tell us about the kind of opportunities which are emerging in the base metal space on the MCX exchange. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, very good afternoon to all the participants. I have been in this industry, especially in commodities, from last 23 years. You can say that. I mean, MCX and NCDX per se, they launched commodity platform on electronic exchanges in 2003, and today we are in 2026. So it's been 23 years, since we have, commodity derivative contracts being traded on electronic exchanges. And most of you are already aware of, the commodity derivative market ecosystem. But ज़्यादातर हम में से लोग commodity derivative markets को बुलियन यानी गोल्ड और सिल्वर के नाम पे जानते हैं, या तो एनर्जी प्रोडक्ट साइड में हम जानते हैं क्रूड ऑयल या नेचुरल गैस फ्रंट पे. सो गोल्ड, सिल्वर, क्रूड ऑयल, नेचुरल गैस, ये थोड़े फेवरेट कमोडिटी कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स के तौर पे जाने जाते हैं. सो वन ऑफ द बिगेस्ट एसेट क्लास which is the lifeline of any economy in the world is industrial metals, right? और हमें बहुत सारे रिक्वेस्ट आए थे कि एक डेडिकेटेड सेशन ऑन इंडस्ट्रियल मेटल्स होना ज़रूरी है, बिकॉज इंडस्ट्रियल मेटल्स दे डिफाइन दी कंट्रीज ओवरऑल ग्रोथ स्टोरी. एंड कैसे जो करंट जियोपॉलिटिकल सिनारियो है, जो करंट इकोनॉमिक सिनारियो है, वो इंडस्ट्रियल मेटल्स से एक इकोनॉमी के ग्रोथ के डायरेक्शन में रोल अदा कर रहा है, उसके बारे में थोड़ा मेरे ख्याल से जानना ज़रूरी है. एंड अगर कोई इन्वेस्टर है जो कि इंडस्ट्रियल मेटल्स में इन्वेस्ट करके एक व्यू बना के काम करना चाहे एक्सचेंज के प्लेटफॉर्म पे वो, और कोई अगर ट्रेडर है जिसको जो वॉलेटिलिटी ऑन हैंड है इंडस्ट्रियल मेटल्स में, अगर उससे फायदा अगर कुछ उठाना है एक्सचेंज ट्रेडेड प्लेटफॉर्म से, तो वी थॉट we'll take them through the concept of industrial metals that is available. So I'll take you through a brief presentation. I'll talk for what 5-7 minutes, and then I'll pass on the responsibility to Chandrasekhar ji. He'll take you through the entire industrial metal pack and its impact. So for new entrants, especially people who are not aware of commodity derivative contracts, I just would like to give them a 30-second introduction. Like we have equity derivative contracts available like Nifty and Sensex. We also have commodity contracts available, commodity derivative contracts, जो future or option contracts होते हैं. Broadly, they are categorized into four sections. We have precious metal जहाँ पे gold, silver है. We have energy sector जहाँ पे crude oil, natural gas, and recently even electricity contracts भी launch हुए. And then we have industrial metals जो आज का in focus topic है, जहाँ पे we have contracts of copper, lead, zinc, aluminium, nickel, future and option contracts available हैं. And उसके बाद we do have agri derivative contracts that are available. And अगर exchange platform की हम बात करते हैं तो you can trade in these commodities through popular exchanges like आप MCX के प्लेटफॉर्म से ट्रेड कर सकते हैं, या तो आप NCDX के प्लेटफॉर्म से ट्रेड कर सकते हैं सेलेक्ट कमोडिटीज, और इवन NSE और BSE भी अभी कमोडिटी एक्सचेंजेस के तौर पे उभर के आ रहे हैं. इवन दे हैव कमोडिटी कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स लिस्टेड. एंड अगर हम डेरिवेटिव कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स की बात करते हैं तो द फर्स्ट थिंग दैट वी शुड नो इज कमोडिटी मार्केट्स दे रन अक्रॉस द ग्लोब. It's not just in India, but we have US markets, then we have European markets, UK market है, and then Asian markets हैं. तो round the clock commodity markets चालू रहता है. But Indian context में अगर हम बात करते हैं तो commodity markets start in the morning at 9 a.m. and they work till 11:30 p.m. in the evening. So you can roughly say that ये एक तकरीबन 15 घंटे का मार्केट है during the day, and that's why the screen shows when equity slept, कमोडिटीज एक्सप्लोडेड, यानी 3:30 के बाद भी मार्केट जो है एक्टिव है 11:30 तक, राइट. If you want to know how exactly the commodity ecosystem works on the derivative exchanges, we have different types of participants. We have investors, we have traders, we have arbitragers, we have institutions, we have value chain participants, and we have corporate clients. And every participant uses the exchange traded derivative contracts in a different way. एक इन्वेस्टर एक प्राइस आउटलुक को लेके पैसे बनाने के ऑब्जेक्टिव से इस मार्केट में काम करता है, क्योंकि लिवरेज प्रोडक्ट है डेरिवेटिव कॉन्ट्रैक्ट में. यू डोंट हैव टू पे फुल मनी. So if I'm an investor and if I'm bullish on copper or let's say steel or zinc or aluminium, I'll simply pay 10-15% of the margin, and I take a long position in the future or option contracts, and I hold it for a certain period of time, जिससे अगर प्राइस बढ़ता है मेरे एंटिसिपेशन से तो I make money and I book profit. If I'm a trader, then I'll be very short term in my thought process, जहाँ पे मेरा ऑब्जेक्टिव होगा कि सुबह से शाम में जो मोमेंट है, वोलेटिलिटी है, उससे मैं कैसे अपने ट्रेडिंग स्ट्रेटजीज के थ्रू मुनाफा कमाऊं. सो यू हैव ट्रेडर्स देयर, यू हैव इंडस्ट्रीज जो वैल्यू चेन हम बोलते हैं, जो हेजर्स हम बोलते हैं. देयर ऑब्जेक्टिव इज टू प्रोटेक्ट देयर इंटरेस्ट फ्रॉम द प्राइस फ्लक्चुएशन, right? So they use the future and option contracts of these commodities to manage their price risk. अगर मेरे पास कॉपर का स्टॉक पड़ा है वेयरहाउस से, तो मेरे पास उस स्टॉक के वैल्यू का गिरने का रिस्क है, तो आई नॉर्मली टेक अ काउंटर पोजीशन बाय सेलिंग दैट वर्थ ऑफ कॉपर ऑन दी फ्यूचर प्लेटफॉर्म, या तो मैं एक पुट ऑप्शन खरीद के रख लूंगा, ताकि अगर प्राइसेस गिरते हैं तो जो मेरा स्टॉक, जो फिजिकल स्टॉक में जो प्राइस गिरने की वजह से नुकसान हो रहा है, उसका कंपनसेशन हो जाए डेरिवेटिव कॉन्ट्रैक्ट. सो दैट इज कॉल्ड एज हेजिंग. एंड वी डू हैव इंस्टीट्यूशनल पार्टिसिपेंट्स, आर्बिट्राज करने वाले भी क्लाइंट होते हैं, जो स्पॉट और फ्यूचर के प्राइसेस में जो गैप होता है, डिफरेंस होता है, उससे फायदा उठाने वाले भी होते हैं. तो यू विल सी वैरायटी ऑफ पार्टिसिपेंट्स, बी इट इन्वेस्टर, बी इट ट्रेडर और वैल्यू चेन. You see different type of participants exploring these derivative contracts, and the number of participants is growing because the popularity of the commodity derivative market is growing, and that growth is also on account of the uncertainty that we are seeing in the geopolitics or global economy, right? तो I think आने वाले स्लाइड में I'll also highlight कि कैसे कमोडिटी मार्केट का जो फ्लक्चुएशन है, जिसका जिसका असर हमको वॉल्यूम्स में कन्वर्ट होते हुए नजर आ रहा है. सो दिस स्लाइड टॉक्स अबाउट respective commodities volatility during the last 12 months. अगर आप जो पहला कॉलम देखेंगे जहां पे वोलेटिलिटी परसेंटेज हमने हाईलाइट किया है, दिस टॉक्स अबाउट द लो एंड हाई, इट टेस्टेड इन टर्म्स ऑफ परसेंटेज इन इन लास्ट 12 मंथ्स, राइट। अगर हम इंडस्ट्रियल मेटल के फ्रंट पे देखेंगे तो कॉपर ने 72.5 73% तक का लो हाई का डिफरेंस दिखाया है ड्यूरिंग दी लास्ट 12 मंथ्स टाइम। लाइकवाइज एल्यूमिनियम का तकरीबन 67% का फ्लक्चुएशन दिखाया है लो और हाई में। जिंक अगर आप देखते हैं तो मोर देन 50% का फ्लक्चुएशन दिखाया है। सो दैट टॉक्स अबाउट द काइंड ऑफ वॉलेटिलिटी वी आर सीइंग in these industrial metal prices. And for your reference, we have also highlighted how the precious metals have moved, and also how the energy contracts like crude oil and natural gas have moved. So almost all commodity baskets अगर हम देखते हैं volatility perspective से, तो सारे ही contracts जो हैं volatile है, which means it is an opportunity for an investor and trader. And it also means it is a necessity for a physical value chain participant who want to manage his price risk. अगर आप price risk इसको manage नहीं करेंगे, if you don't hedge, then you are exposing yourself to a risk of this kind of volatility, right? So most of the industries are also using this platform to manage their price risk. So we have given a gist of the kind of volatility we have seen. एक रेंज भी हमने रुपी टर्म में हाईलाइट किया है, और कॉन्ट्रैक्ट वैल्यू का रुपी टर्म में क्या रिस्क या रिटर्न हो सकता था एक लॉट के हिसाब से, वो हमने हाईलाइट किया हुआ है फॉर योर इजियर अंडरस्टैंडिंग। अगर इसी को मैं और थोड़ा माइन्यूटली डाइसेक्ट करूं, तो ये 30 डेज का एवरेज डेली वॉलेटिलिटी वर्सेस द मार्जिन एफिशिएंसी के बारे में बताता है। अगेन ऑल दी कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स दैट आर लिस्टेड ऑन इलेक्ट्रॉनिक एक्सचेंजेस, और उसका जो लॉट साइज है वो हमने हाईलाइट किया हुआ है, और एक एवरेज डेली मूव का एक परसेंटेज हमने डाला हुआ है लास्ट 30 डेज का। तो दिस एवरेज डेली मूव टॉक्स अबाउट दैट पर्टिकुलर कमोडिटीज प्राइस फ्लक्चुएशन इन अ सिंगल डे। अगर हम कॉपर की बात करते हैं या जिंक की बात करते हैं एज ए इंडस्ट्रियल मेटल, ऑन एन एवरेज इट इज मूविंग अप और डाउन बाय 2%। 2% is massive on a daily basis if you look at it, even though आप सिल्वर या गोल्ड में भी देखेंगे कि 4 से 2 या 5% तक का वॉलेटिलिटी दिख रहा है, बट इवन इंडस्ट्रियल मेटल्स आर रिस्पॉन्डिंग वेरी एक्टिवली, एंड द काइंड ऑफ वॉलेटिलिटी वी आर सीइंग, इट विल हैव स्विंग्स दैट विल हैव एन इम्पैक्ट ऑफ क्लोज टू 12% अगर मैं इंडस्ट्रियल मेटल से बात करूंगा, क्योंकि ये डेरिवेटिव कॉन्ट्रैक्ट है, यहाँ पे मार्जिन के बेसिस पे काम होता है। लाइक इफ यू वांट टू बाय वन लॉट ऑफ कॉपर, वो कॉपर का लॉट साइज 2,500 किलो का है, यानी 2.5 टन का है, उसका मार्जिन एक्सचेंज पे 10 से 15% होगा। और अगर 100% के वैल्यू पे 2% का मूवमेंट हो रहा है, तो लिवरेज्ड पोजीशन पे आपके एक दिन में 12% का फ्लक्चुएशन आएगा। यानी a client may earn or lose 12% in a single day in that particular commodity, the kind of swing we are able to see. So this creates an opportunity for a lot of enthusiasts who like volatility, especially the traders. Traders को जितना ज्यादा volatility है उतना उनको इंटरेस्ट आता है, because their objective is to encash upon the day's volatility. Their objective is to monetize the volatility. Even investors tend to like volatility because they want more bucks for their investment. So commodity market is giving that flavor to all the participants. And for reference, we have also kept equity indices जहाँ पे हमने similar way में क्या volatility है, even equity markets have been volatile, so we have just given that comparison to you for your reference. तो जैसे मैंने पहले बताया था, एक्सचेंज ट्रेडेड डेरिवेटिव कॉन्ट्रैक्ट से इंडियन कॉन्टेक्स्ट में सुबह 9 बजे से लेकर रात के 11:30 बजे तक का टाइम है। तो एज ए पार्टिसिपेंट, इफ यू आर अ इन्वेस्टर और ट्रेडर, ये आपको एक कैपिटल एफिशिएंसी का भी बेनिफिट देता है, क्योंकि एक तो आपका इक्विटी मार्केट 9:15 से लेकर 3:30 बजे तक का होगा। 3:30 के बाद अगर आपको उसी मार्जिन को यूज करना है कमोडिटी में, तो आप वो कर सकते हैं। तो एनी फ्री मार्जिन जो इक्विटी का है वो आप कमोडिटी में यूज कर सकते हो ड्यूरिंग द सेम टाइम। इट इज कॉल्ड एज मार्जिन फंजिबिलिटी। तो मार्जिन फंजिबिलिटी का फायदा ज्यादातर लोग उठाते हैं। इफ आई हैव केप्ट 5 लाख रुपीज, आई कैन यूज दैट 5 लाख रुपीज इन निफ्टी और सेंसेक्स इन द मॉर्निंग, एंड आफ्टर 3:30 the unused component of that, the free component of that can be used in commodity markets as well. So there is no separate margin requirement as such जो कि आपको अलग से deposit करना है for trading in commodity. Any unused component in your account can be commonly used in any of the asset classes, उसको हम margin fungibility बोलते हैं. तो there is margin fungibility between equity and commodity which you can benefit from. And commodity market, क्योंकि global commodity markets हैं, 80% of the fluctuation comes after 3:30. सो 3:30 तक इक्विटी में जो क्लाइंट्स एक्टिव हैं वो 3:30 के बाद कमोडिटी मार्केट्स को एक्सप्लोर करते हैं टिल 11:30. सो एडवांटेजेस ऑफ कैपिटल एफिशिएंसी है यहाँ पे, और एडवांटेज ऑफ द एक्सटेंडेड मार्केट आवर्स भी है यहाँ पे, जो कि क्लाइंट एक्सप्लोर करना कोशिश करते हैं. प्लस आई थिंक people who have the understanding of equity derivatives, who understand the concept of futures and options, for them commodity derivative contracts become that much easy because 95% of the concept is same. बस वो सेटलमेंट का जो साइकिल है, जो एक्सपायरी डेज हैं, वो थोड़ा आई थिंक आपको ध्यान देना पड़ता है. बाकी द फंक्शंस आर मोर और लेस सेम. 90 to 95% ऑफ द कॉन्सेप्ट इज सेम. अगर हम एक्सचेंज का ग्रोथ का देखते हैं इन टर्म्स ऑफ वॉल्यूम, you can see the left hand graph talks about the future contract volume at exchange. The volume used to be close to 25-30,000 crore a day, and it surpassed 1 lakh crore a day volume also recently, that is in February, and now also the volumes are close to 65-70,000 crore. So it's a 3x growth we have seen from if we compare it just a year back number. So this talks about the kind of participation this market is receiving and the kind of popularity it is gaining. And on the option side also, if we look at the option premium turnover numbers, these numbers were very, very small to start with. If we look at last year's number, we were less than 2,500 crore premium turnover on a daily basis, and that number is close to 10,000 crore premium number. So on an average, we are able to see 10,000 crore worth of premium turnover happening, which was like just a year back, close to 2,500 crore a day. That means even the option premium turnover numbers have grown by 4x just in a matter of 1 year time. So why we are highlighting this number? People who want to understand whether there is enough depth in the market, whether there is enough liquidity in the Indian commodity derivative ecosystem. These are the numbers that give you that confidence that yes, there is decent liquidity as well as market depth which is available. And this is the distribution of the premium turnover across the other different asset classes. I just thought I'll highlight it here. And from our front perspective, I mean, from our perspective, if we want to look at it from client side, Kotak Neo at our end, we have a official Telegram channel where we have close to 70,000 people who are part of that Telegram channel, where we share our research recommendations, where we share our technical and fundamental reports to educate more and more people. We do conduct expiry live sessions, on almost all commodity expiry days to educate people on how the expiry, works for respective commodity and how you can read the fluctuations. And we have daily research coverage. We have training and webinars like we are doing now, and we also have a strong dealer and research support network across the country to cater to all the clients who want to understand more about commodities. And this is the last slide where we normally highlight the disclosure from Kotak Neo side. You should be aware, and you should also make sure there is some homework that one needs to do before participating in any derivative instrument, because these are leverage products. So when we say leverage, it will come with its own risk. So due diligence is required. So any point that we are discussing here should not be taken as a recommendation. It should be looked into as an attempt to share awareness and knowledge from our side. So I think I just wanted to give this introduction before we move to our main presentation by our beloved guest, Mr. Chandrasekhar. So over to you, Chandrasekhar, sir.
So, Sunil, thank you very much. Wonderful. I think, does Anindya have something to say?
No, sir. It's over to you.
All right. Thank you very much. Give me a moment, but Sunil, I want to compliment you for. Let me just share screen. Where is it? Yeah. For this wonderful exposition. It's extremely important that you brought out the opportunities in this market. Where am I? Yes, slideshow. Here goes my presentation. So, and very important, you talked about education, which is again important. I'm going to, over the next possibly between 15 and 20 minutes, talk about a new industrial metals playbook, which is what I'm actually perceiving and seeing it in the market. And I've been tracking commodities for decades. But I'm not a trader. That's my disclaimer all the time I give. I'm a student of this market, and I enjoy studying and understanding this market. But I'm going to speak about global industrial metals and what is the emerging scenario. What should all of us who look at these industrial metals market have got to know, and what is the emerging scenario, which is in my view extremely important. Now, the question is, and I'm convinced that there is a new era for global metals market in particular, industrial metals market in particular. And why am I saying this? We have seen over the last 25 to 30 years, the industrial metals market in the world was dominated by just one story, which is the China story. If, as they say, if China sneezes, the world metals market catches cold. That's the kind of dominance that China enjoyed. But I am able to see very clearly that that picture is slowly changing, and there's a new era for the global industrial metals market. And I'll show you. I'll share with you why I'm saying what I'm saying. My own sense, again, as I said, this market, industrial metals market, is going very significant shift from what is called a China-led super cycle of the 2000s, which is 2000 to say 2020. Okay, or even it started in 1990, 95. To be honest, but it really peaked in the first decade and a half of this century, which is very important. And China was the mover and shaker of the global industrial metals market. The next phase of growth, in my view, will not be driven by a single growth engine like China, for example, and it will not be a single macro narrative. Okay, if you all remember, we are in 2026, 2015 or 2016, 10 years ago, Chinese leadership decided that they will move away from fixed asset investment to consumption-led growth. China's growth over the last 25 to 30 years was investment-led growth. They invested extraordinarily heavily in what are called fixed assets, particularly your infrastructure, construction, real estate, etc., etc. And all that generated massive demand for all kinds of industrial metals. And therefore, China was the only story available. Beyond, of course, the Western world, which was always contributing to the industrial metals demand, but their own consumption levels started to stagnate, and China's consumption levels, successive years, it continued to increase. But that is now, I'm not saying it's coming to an end, but it's actually tapering down. And therefore, the next growth for industrial metals, global growth, is not going to be driven by a single engine, or it's not going to be a simple macro narrative. Yeah, China का विकास के वजह से इंडस्ट्रियल मेटल्स बढ़ेगा. Therefore, it's not a single narrative. तो मैं देख रहा हूं कि आगे जाकर के आने वाला 5, 10, 15, 20 साल में एक emergence of a global metals marketplace, जिसमें मैं देख रहा हूं it will be more fragmented, it will be more policy driven, and it will be more geopolitically charged. और हम इस महसूस अभी भी हम कर रहे हैं. अभी भी ये जो इंडस्ट्रियल मेटल्स मार्केट है, इट इज जियोपॉलिटिकली चार्ज. ओके, और ये मार्केट काफी फ्रैगमेंट हो रहा है और पॉलिसी ड्रिवन. हर एक देश अपना खुद का पॉलिसी एक बना रहा है, एंड विच इज फाइन बिकॉज द पॉलिसी कॉन्टेक्स्ट इज बिकमिंग क्वाइट कॉम्प्लेक्स, और हर एक देश को अपने ही बारे में सोचना है, and therefore which is what every country is doing, and therefore the emergence of a global marketplace which will be characterized by fragmentation, which will be characterized by policies of individual countries, and it will be charged, highly charged, because of geopolitical development. तो एक पहला प्रपोजिशन मैं ये रखना चाहता हूँ। दूसरा एक प्रपोजिशन हम बात करेंगे डिमांड के बारे में, फिर सप्लाई के बारे में, फिर जियोपॉलिटिक्स के बारे में। डिमांड के बारे में मैं देख रहा हूं कि इट्स बिकमिंग मोर डाइवर्स। एज आई सेड अर्लियर, इट वाज ओनली वन स्टोरी, चाइना स्टोरी। चाइना ड्राइव डिमांड फॉर इंडस्ट्रियल मेटल। मगर अब जो चाइना का भूमिका है इस इंडस्ट्रियल मेटल मार्केट में, अभी भी काफी बड़ा है उनका भूमिका, उनका अहम है उनका भूमिका, मगर इट इज नो लॉन्गर द डोमिनेटिंग फोर्स। इट्स अ बिग कंज्यूमर, इट्स अ की कंज्यूमर, इसमें कोई दो राय नहीं हो सकता, मगर it is not able to dominate this market as it used to say until 10 years ago. इसका कारण है, as I said earlier, China has moved away from fixed asset investment led growth to consumption led growth. इसके वजह से China's import basket is also undergoing changes. They want to deliver more and more for consumers in their import basket, and therefore there will be more production of say white goods, for example. The composition of metals for white goods would be slightly different from the composition of metals required for fixed asset investment. Okay, and therefore that's a subtle change which we need to understand. When I say white goods का मतलब क्या है? Refrigerators, air conditioners, those kinds of gadgets, or even automobiles for that matter. And therefore that's important. और दूसरा है, we are in an era of energy transition, and in energy transition we are looking at renewable energy is one, and second we are looking at electrification, very substantial electrification, and therefore demand for industrial metals is going to be more and more sector specific, and it's going to be shaped by primarily electrification. और जब हम electrification कहते हैं, we are talking about electric vehicles. We are also going to be discussing electric mobility, whether it is roadways or railways or airways or seaways. Electrification is going to be extremely important, and electrification by its very nature is very highly metals intensive. Electric vehicles लोगे तो electric vehicles are highly metals intensive, unlike the internal combustion engine vehicles. I'm sure all of us know the difference. Therefore, electrification means more and more demand for industrial metals. The second one is clean energy or renewable energy. Obviously, we have wind energy, we have solar energy, and for wind energy we need turbines. For solar energy we need panels, solar panels, etc. And they are all highly metals intensive, and therefore our energy transition moving towards clean energy, moving towards renewable का मतलब है कि there will be more and more demand for industrial metals. तीसरा एक कारण है डिमांड के लिए, डिफेंस. Every country is now going to already spending, but is now going to spend increasing amounts on defense expenditure. Already the world is facing a huge amount of stresses, the geopolitical stresses. It is not just Russia, Ukraine, or it is not Israel, Hamas, or it is not just India, Pakistan, or it is not just Iran versus the US and Israel. All this, we have lived through all these times. But आगे जाकर के there are also looming risks. Say Taiwan, for example, or the US eyeing Cuba, or Greenland, whatever. All these are possibilities. We cannot dismiss these possibilities, and there could be newer newer challenges, newer tensions that can erupt. And therefore, countries are going to be increasingly spending more and more money on defense preparedness, and that will involve huge amount of the involvement of demand for industrial metals. And last but not the least, something which has been happening over the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, this is a data centers, the data infrastructure. Data centers are huge guzzlers of energy. And therefore, that will call for higher and higher levels of electrification and consumption of power. And that will again involve industrial metals, which will help help in transmission, for instance. And therefore, this sector-specific demand is now going to drive the industrial metals market over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years that I'm able to foresee. But ये जो शिफ्ट ये हो रहा है, जब हम बात कर रहे हैं डिफेंस हो या डेटा सेंटर्स हो या क्लीन एनर्जी हो, it is not going to happen across the world evenly across all countries. It is going to be quite uneven. Okay, and it will depend on the policies of every government, and it's going to be substantially policy driven and sensitive to technology. क्या सभी देश सभी टेक्नोलॉजी को एक्सेस कर पाएंगे? पता नहीं. It may not be possible, but technology is also expensive, and therefore the countries will have to make technology choices, and therefore they will have to have a policy, and therefore demand for industrial metals is not going to be even across the world, but it will depend on countries' technology choices, and of course the regulatory oversight that every country will have. And therefore you're seeing even currently, हम देख रहे हैं 2025 में हमने देखा, पिछले 4 महीने में भी हमने देखा कि the metals that are leading the rally right now are those that are critical for electrification worldwide. So this is something हम महसूस कर रहे हैं अभी भी, and that is likely to happen over the coming year. तो डिमांड के बारे में मैं ये कहना चाहता हूँ. अब आएंगे अब सप्लाई के बारे में. Supplies, I am seeing very clearly, are going to ease, in fact, becoming less and less elastic. Usually क्या होता है, when prices start to rise, there'll be supplies will be driven by higher prices. It's called it's supply elasticity of price जो हम कहते हैं. मगर ये जो सप्लाई है इंडस्ट्रियल मेटल्स मार्केट में will become less elastic. ऐसा नहीं कि भाव बढ़ गया और तुरंत कंजम्पशन तुरंत उत्पादन भी बढ़ गया, इससे नहीं होगा. And therefore supplies will always trail demand growth. और ये क्यों हो रहा है और ये क्यों होगा? Very clearly the supply response to price, as we say, is slowing. क्योंकि पिछले मैं देख रहा हूं 5-10 बरस में दुनिया में investment in industrial metals production is not adequate. There is under investment in this sector in terms of exploration and production. दूसरा मैं देख रहा हूं, और एक खास करके साउथ अमेरिकन कंट्रीज, और ग्रेड्स आर डिक्लाइनिंग. तो हमें कई दशकों से हमने इसका जो एक्सट्रैक्शन किया है हमने, तो और ग्रेड्स आर beginning to decline. और तीसरा कारण है कि जो इंडस्ट्रियल मेटल्स एक्सप्लोरेशन है, it always involves a long gestation period. And therefore, from the day I decide to invest, I prepare a feasibility report, and the time that I get my first lot of production may be anything between 5 and 8 years. That's the kind of gestation period that this has. And therefore, supplies are becoming less and less elastic. Or this becomes even worse when you bring in environmental concerns. Countries are obviously worried, concerned about environmental degradation, and therefore there are more and more rules and regulations to contain the adverse environmental impact. And then you have other regulatory constraints to reduce emissions, for example. And there will also be social pressures. और हमने देखा है कई देशों में social pressures की वजह से भी supply is becoming less and less elastic. हमारा ही देश में एक उदाहरण है your Sterlite copper refined copper factory in Tuticorin. Until 2017-18, India was a net exporter of refined copper. 2018-19, so we become net importers of refined copper. We are spending billions of dollars. So that factory has a 4 lakh ton per annum capacity. So suddenly वो चला गया capacity because of whatever activism and various issues related to that. And therefore, social pressures are also going to play a role in constraining smooth supply. Then you also have resource nationalism. This resource nationalism means countries want to conserve their natural resources. उसका बड़ा classic example है Indonesia. In case of nickel, for example. And now they're talking about even palm oil. They want to regulate palm oil export. Therefore, nickel is such an interesting and important industrial metal. Countries like Indonesia are now not exactly nationalizing their resource, but there will be state control on the amount of export that can take place. And then export controls are also imposed. For example, China's export controls on critical minerals. All of that. And then therefore stockpiling. Countries are now stockpiling. Europe, I think probably it is there in the next slide. Europe is stockpiling critical minerals. Therefore, that stockpiling, all this resource nationalism, export control, stockpiling, all of them, in my view, are actually disrupting the established supply chain. And then that's something which is very important we need to remember. So, इसका क्या असर क्या होगा? इसका असर होगा market tightness. Market tightness will continue to persist for a longer period of time. Price spikes ज़्यादा होगा, volatility जैसे सुनील ने बताया ज़्यादा होने का संभावना है, और ये जो माहौल है कि डिमांड बढ़ती जाएगा, supply will not be able to catch up as much as demand grow. तो ये तो एक आइडियल सिचुएशन है फॉर स्पेकुलेटिव कैपिटल टू कम इन. और जब कोई मार्केट में स्पेकुलेटिव कैपिटल आ जाता है, then it increases the volatility and it has a disproportionately larger impact on the prices. Okay, so this is something all of us have to remember. Geopolitics, खास करके हमने अभी देखा है इन लास्ट 3-4 वर्षों में कि geopolitics is now taken center stage. Geopolitical developments are skewering the metals market, starting with, of course, Russia, Ukraine conflict, sanctions on Russia, etc. All of that. So, supply chain का एक बड़ा risk है when geopolitical developments result in sanctions and protectionism, etc., which is important. And therefore, countries, corporates and countries are wanting to reduce over-dependence on a single origin to source their product, or they want to reduce their dependence on a single destination market. So, because this is very risky, when I export to only one big destination market and I'm happy and something were to happen to that destination market and not able to export, I get stuck. Same with my sourcing of raw material or goods from a single market. And therefore, if you do not have over dependence on your origin or your destination market, is a lesson countries and corporates are learning now. Therefore, what are they doing? They're diversifying their sources of supply and they're diversifying their export markets. And increasingly, corporates are building reserves. That is becoming the norm. And policies, countries, administration, and governments are encouraging this building of reserves, which is becoming the norm, and it will continue to remain the norm even for the future. एक जापान का एक प्रिंसिपल होता था just in time, JIT, which used to be very popular 30-40 years ago. और JIT अब चला गया. अब JIT के बदले just in case, समझो कहीं कुछ हो गया और मुझे सप्लाई नहीं आ रहा है, हमारा नहीं मिल पाता है मुझे, तो जस्ट इन केस के वजह से आई विल स्टार्ट बिल्डिंग और इन्वेंट्री और स्टॉक पाइलिंग, एंड देयरफॉर रिजर्व बिल्डिंग रिजर्व इज नाउ बिकमिंग द नॉर्म. इसका उदाहरण है यूरोप. यूरोपियन यूनियन में देयर इज अ न्यू एक्शन प्लान कॉल्ड रिसोर्स EU एक्शन प्लान, which aims to actually stockpile critical minerals. And then they have a 5-year plan to stockpile critical minerals. They want to secure particularly all those materials, and of course our industrial metals are very important for green tech, which is very important, and under the critical raw material act. I think they have an act, and they want to secure their supplies, which are important for their green technology and sustainability of their economic activity. And जब कोई देश स्टॉक पाइलिंग का पॉलिसी अपनाता है, तो यूजुअली it is not price sensitive. Whatever be the price, they will buy, because the government policy is to stockpile whatever critical minerals or any sensitive industrial metal, and therefore this is happening. Or the next one is, of course, all of us know in European Union, the carbon border adjustment mechanism. ये क्या है carbon border adjustment mechanism? See, that is nothing but a tax or a penalty. They say that they want to advance sustainability, they want to encourage decarbonization, and they want to encourage metals with low emissions. Fine, I think which they are well within their right to do what they are doing. But they want to discourage import of metals which have high levels of carbon emission. For example, steel. For example, aluminium. These are products that are going to take a hit while exporting to European Union. Already, countries like India, China, South Africa, these countries have all objected to the EU's CBAM, which has come into effect from 1st January this year. But EU is not going to relent at all, and therefore their idea is to encourage supplier countries to reduce the carbon footprint and carbon emissions. So from their perspective, which is fine, and if we want to export to that market any product with industrial metals, we need to reduce our carbon emissions. So that's something we need to remember. And therefore, when you look at the demand side, look at the supply side, look at how geopolitics has entered the metal space, I'm seeing very clearly there is a new playbook. There's a new playbook for industrial metals. Okay, and what is this playbook? Very clearly, what does it show? ये हमें दर्शाता है कि ये जो forces है, demand force, supply force, and geopolitical forces, all these forces, when they combine, in my view, the next metals cycle, industrial metal cycle, जो आ रहा है, आने वाला भी नहीं है, आ गया है, आ चुका है लगभग, और आगे it will have its role over the next 5, 10, 15 years, 20 years. That will be fundamentally different from what we have seen in the past. जैसे पहले मैंने बताया, it is actually more of a China story, but it won't be any more sole China story. China will be important, but there are other countries which are becoming important, and therefore the new phase for metals, what will shape the new phase for industrial metals, which will be different from the previous cycle, is one, diversified demand sources. Demand will be quite diversified, and that will be driven, as I said, by electrification, defense expenditure, and digital infrastructure. And all of us have to remember, and all these are massive growth sectors for most countries around the world. And then slower supply response in the midst of very constrained and politicized marketplace, which is something we need to remember. Increased volatility due to geopolitics and decarbonization, or growing role of stockpiling and defense spending. I think this is a new industrial metals playbook that I'm seeing, and we have to understand these drivers. These are extraordinarily important, and if we have a good understanding these drivers, which will be central to the industrial metals market dynamics, and the market participants will be able to navigate the industrial metals market, not just in 2026, but well beyond 2026. शायद आगे 5, 10, 15 साल के लिए, 15 वर्षों के लिए ये प्लेबुक चलेगा, ऐसा मेरा अनुमान है. So I will stop here. Good luck and God bless. I'll stop sharing is number one. Number two, yes, Anindya, I think we'll take it forward. Or if I may speak
Sure,
another 2 more minutes,
yes.
If it's okay with you.
Yeah, sure.
मैं ये बोलना चाहता था कि look at 2025. क्या हुआ 2025 LME index rose 20%. 20% from the beginning of the year. By the end of the year, it was up 20%. And it was driven by metals, LME metals index, but not all base metals. There were only 2 metals which actually drove the index up, copper and aluminium. And those copper and aluminium 2 metals are the story currently, which is operating. And therefore, even in early 2026, I was very clear by January that the metals will be very well supported in the whole of 2026. Global growth prospects would improve, and anticipated fall in interest rates, tightening fundamentals, etc. But came this Iran war, and we went to a very different trajectory of the market. But what is important is we need to remember that China, which continues to be the mover and shaker of the market, is actually curbing overcapacity in a number of metals, particularly steel. They want to curb they have overcapacity. They're curbing that overcapacity. China has also set new limits on metals production, and particularly there are 10 non-ferrous metals where they want to cut their production at least minimum 1.5% a year over the next several years. And therefore, that is also going to constrain supply, because China is rather worried and rather concerned about pollution. It's been a big issue in China that I've been tracking for 15 or 20 years. Pollution is a big issue, and therefore they want to ensure that the metal sector reduces its emission levels and contributes to better air quality, etc. Yeah, I think I'll stop here.
Thank you, sir, for the fantastic insight. In fact, the kind of points which you have made is quite unique. क्योंकि जनरली क्या होता है कि हाँ, हम लोग जब कोई बेस मेटल्स के ऊपर बात करते हैं या कमोडिटीज के ऊपर, जनरल एक डिमांड और सप्लाई, एंड व्हाट वी हैव सीन ओवर द लास्ट 1-1.5 साल में कि इफ समबडी इज बुलिश ऑन कॉपर, दे विल ऑटोमेटिकली हाईलाइट कि 2040 में इतना डेफिसिट होगा. दैट्स लाइक 14-15 years away, conveniently forgetting the cyclicality of the commodity market. But you have basically pinned it down to the structural story, which is once in a possibly 100 years. The kind of common theme जो हम लोगों ने अभी तक जितने भी ऑफलाइन या ऑनलाइन वेबिनार्स किए हैं, वो एक कॉमन थीम रहा है कि वी आर इन अ काइंड ऑफ अ ग्लोबल ऑर्डर रीसेट, और उसका एक direct impact is coming into commodities, because commodities are like kind of the phrase which I use is in this reset era, commodities become the currency, because it is what people trust. It's what people can depend on. So your point on resource nationalization, then you talked about export controls, stockpiling, fragmentation of supply chains, deglobalization. And then you said a fantastic thing called from JIT, we are moving to JIC, right? So if I connect all these things, like you also talked about de-risking your export market. जो export market है single destination नहीं होना चाहिए और होना चाहिए. Same thing for the acquisition of resources. Now, all of them, if I connect it with a single thread, it just means that जो हम लोगों का जो last 50 साल 70 साल या 80 साल का जो एक global order बना हुआ था, वहाँ पे जो रिसोर्सेस का एक पेकिंग ऑर्डर था, लैंड, लेबर, कैपिटल, नेचुरल रिसोर्स, उसके ऊपर था डॉलर एज अ फिएट करेंसी. इफ यू own the dollar, everything is GIT.
Correct.
I think is that what is breaking down, and that is what is creating this structural move?
Actually speaking, there's an attempt to break it down. Okay. Personally, I believe de-dollarization is still quite far away. There are attempts, as you know, but I still believe the dollar will continue to remain the major fiat currency for the world. You can't wish it away, although there will be attempts, and there's nothing wrong in those attempts to de-dollarize the world trade. So it'll continue. But what is important is my worry personally, and I'm not an alarmist, but I'm able to imagine, and often I'm able to foresee what is coming. There is a risk, in my view, of the world fracturing. The world could be fracturing in terms of, you remember the Cold War of the 50s and 60s, Soviet Union versus America, and all of that. That era is over. That era is over. But there could be a new era where there will not be a Cold War, but there can potentially be two different axes. One possibly led by the US and the other led by China. Because both these countries are very strong in terms of their economy, $30 trillion and $20 trillion. Technologically, they are quite advanced. Militarily, they are very powerful. Chinese currency is gradually internationalizing more and more. Therefore, there could be one axis led by the US, and there'll be some countries which will go with the US, the European Union, for example, because of NATO and all of that. With China, it could be Russia and several of them. I'm just imagining that. And therefore, if this were to happen, then there are countries like India, for example, हम एक बहुत बड़ा धर्म संकट में आ जाएंगे. Because we have always been non-aligned in some way, politically. But if there is a fracturing of the world, I'm actually doing an exercise. Okay, I don't know whether I should disclose it openly. मैं एक exercise अभी कर रहा हूँ. कौन सा देश में क्या resources है और fracturing होगा, तो which will be those two axes and what kind of resources they will control. There's an exercise. Maybe when we meet next, I'll share some thoughts on that.
Sure.
That can potentially further distort global supply chains. But I think it's not an immediate threat, but you can't rule it out. It is looming, but it is not an immediate threat. But the world is also increasingly becoming, you can't isolate yourself in this world. I can't live in isolation. I'm not an island. I'm not self-sufficient in everything. I have something extra surplus which I want to export, and therefore I need market. There is some shortfall or deficit in my own country which I need to import, and therefore I want suppliers from outside. And therefore there is the mutual dependence between countries will continue. But to what extent, if this fracturing were to happen, will distort the supply chain? What will be the currency of exchange, whatever, all of that, currency of trade, we still don't know, but it can potentially be a possibility. And therefore, the market participants will have to think about all of that. There is no immediate threat, as I said, but we should be ready. We should be ready.
That was a fantastic explanation, sir. So we are actually kind of chaos through which we are going. It's going to be continuing over the next few years at least before we see an order, because that's how the pendulum swings between a chaos and then order. Now, I'll just bring your attention to something which is happening immediately. And that seems to have impacted especially the copper aluminium market to a certain extent, zinc, is that the last 3-4 months we have seen a sharp spike in copper prices. In February on the MCX, if I take that as a reference, it fell to 1100 rupees. It jumped to almost 1350. Aluminium prices have surged by 25 to 30%. So we understand that it is linked with the war in West Asia, where it's just not an energy problem. It's a spillover into other commodities as well. So let's assume that over the next 6 months, the Hormuz crisis gets over, just being optimistic. So do you foresee in that case that copper and the aluminium prices can fall post-resolution significantly?
Honestly saying, we'll deal with it separately. Aluminium, for example. Even today, the Gulf situation is quite fragile. We are talking about an MOU between US and Iran, etc., etc. MOU is one thing, but MOU is only you and I agree that we will not have military action. But the negotiations will start after the MOU, and it can actually stall. And therefore, I call the situation extremely fragile. My own sense in case of aluminium, whoever thought in January that aluminium prices will reach $3,500 plus dollars a ton. I think my sense aluminium will continue to remain firm, probably around $3,650 level, because the Gulf region accounts for 10% of global production. And so long as the Strait of Hormuz remains closed, to that extent, the supplies are not going to be available. But even if the Strait of Hormuz were to open tonight, for the situation to normalize will take at least 3 months, if not longer, which is very important. And therefore, I think in the second half, and assuming that we are in, say, June, in June the supply concerns start to ease, put it that way. And therefore, in the second half, I think there is a small possibility of a 5% decrease in aluminium price for the second half of the year. Maybe it could come around 3,500, and which, assuming again normal conditions in the Strait of Hormuz, will continue into 2027. But I don't see aluminium prices crashing, say, below $3,000 a ton. I think they would stay probably 3,400, 3,500, whatever, around that level in the second half of this year, and possibly spill into the first half of next year also. In terms of copper, there is always the short-term uncertainty. Current prices are what? About $13,700 past international prices.
Yeah.
Because I don't track all of this on a daily basis, but I very broadly know the direction of prices. I am expecting going forward that the demand will definitely rise structurally, as we talked about, because the investment in data infrastructure, data centers, and related infrastructure, particularly in the United States, is opening up. I think it's scaling up massively, and that's a new driver of demand for copper, really. And therefore, personally, I'm slightly positive about the upward price movement in copper global prices. I will not be surprised, say, we are in what, mid-2026. By mid-2027, say it's 12 months from now, from the current what 13,700 or whatever it could go to about 14,300 or around that level, and it may possibly end. Copper can end 2027 at about 14,500. But I'll share something interesting with you. I wrote probably last year or year before, I can't recall. By 2030, copper price, at that time, copper was about $8,500, $9,000 a ton. And I said by 2030, I'm seeing that copper will be $15,000 a ton. But I'm now seeing copper prices reaching $15,000 a ton by 2028. I'm advancing the target by 2 years. By 2028, hopefully, it will reach. I'm not making any investment recommendations at all, but as a student, this is the kind of outlook I'm comfortable with. Therefore, copper, yes, structurally bullish. Aluminium, the recent events have propelled it much higher. But there is going to be a structural story for aluminium also, because increasingly aluminium is replacing copper for lightweighting. For example, electric vehicles. Because they are metals intensive, they are heavy. Therefore, to lightweight those vehicles, copper, aluminium is being increasingly, wherever possible, being substituted. Aluminium is used in place of copper. And therefore, that structural story can also potentially prop it up. But in the short run, the big lift that aluminium received is only because of the war and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Once it normalizes, there is a possibility of a decline, which means very simply, whatever is the speculative froth, speculative ladder in this market, speculative capital will to some extent exit aluminium. That will lead to some correction.
Right. So, which means that both copper and aluminium will have something for the investors and the speculators.
Yes.
So in this, I'll bring Sunil into the discussion. Sunil, this question is for you. So if we look at the participation or the measure is ADV. ADV से पता चलता है कि कितना client का participation in each commodities. So that clearly shows, if I take M6 as a benchmark, that I presume only 4 to 5% is in base metals. So what do you think is the cause of such low participation when the volatility is so high and the structural story is intact? People are so active in the metal stocks. And what do you think could be the path ahead which can take the participation higher?
Yeah, Anindya, I mean, when we look at the overall commodities as a portfolio, like we discussed about having precious metal, energy, industrial metal, and agri commodities as a basket. Precious metals, I mean, the kind of rally they have given during the last 12 months, obviously they grabbed the attention of a lot of participants. We saw silver prices, growing from what, $35 to $120 it moved. In Indian terms, 90,000 रुपया पर केजी से 4,20,000 तक भी चला गया था. इवन गोल्ड प्राइसेस भी 80,000 से 1,90,000 तक पहुंच गया था. डॉलर टर्म में $2,700 से $5,600 का हाई बनाया. तो लास्ट 12 महीने में जो अटेंशन गोल्ड और सिल्वर ने ग्रैब किया, ओवरऑल एक्सचेंज के वॉल्यूम मोर देन डबल हो गए. यानी लास्ट ईयर का ही हम देखते हैं तो 5 लाख करोड़ काइंड ऑफ एवरेज डेली वॉल्यूम वी सॉ during the entire year. On a daily basis, 5 lakh crore का volume होना, and that to a single side volume, is a significant achievement. You can say that is more than double what we saw in terms of a year back, right? उसमें अगर हम industrial metal का volume देखते हैं तो वो भी बड़ा है. Even though the share you can say it is 5%, but 5 लाख करोड़ का अगर 5% भी देखते हैं तो it is still 25-30,000 crore turnover on a daily basis. एंड जो इंडस्ट्रियल कमोडिटीज के ऑप्शन कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स हैं, नियर टू एक्सपायरी द वॉल्यूम्स हैव नाउ स्टार्टेड क्लॉकिंग क्लोज टू 70,000 crore आल्सो, राइट? सो नियर टू एक्सपायरी ऑप्शन में पार्टिसिपेशन इंडस्ट्रियल मेटल में भी बढ़ रहा है, एंड इट इज अ ग्रोथ स्टोरी इन द मेकिंग फॉर इंडस्ट्रियल मेटल्स आल्सो. एंड विद द काइंड ऑफ अप्रिसिएशन in prices we have seen, no doubt we have started getting a lot of query on industrial metals which we hardly used to get before. अभी तो लोग जैसे गोल्ड और सिल्वर में इन्वेस्टमेंट के तौर पे देखते थे. नाउ पीपल हैव स्टार्टेड रीचिंग आउट आस्किंग वेदर वी शुड बाय एंड होल्ड some portion of copper, or should I also diversify and invest in aluminium with the growth story that we all discussed. So that means the awareness is growing, and even the numbers are talking in favor of the growth story that we are seeing in industrial metal. And like I mentioned, अभी अगर हम अप्रैल मई का नंबर्स देखते हैं, तो दी लास्ट ईयर्स एवरेज डेली वॉल्यूम 5 लाख करोड़ से अगर हम अप्रैल और मई का ही देखते हैं, तो वी आर सीइंग दी वॉल्यूम्स क्लोज टू 8 लाख करोड़, right, on a daily basis in commodities. And these are notional numbers that we are talking about, putting together future and option volume. सिंगल साइड वॉल्यूम हम बात कर रहे हैं. और अगर 8 लाख करोड़ का भी अगर हम फिर से 5% लेते हैं, तो 40,000 करोड़ तक का टर्नओवर हमको इंडस्ट्रियल मेटल में देखने को मिल रहा है. तो वी आर सीइंग सिग्निफिकेंट इंक्रीज इन दी क्लाइंट पार्टिसिपेशन. इवन overall client participation number also on the overall commodity derivative market has seen significant growth. Now more than 2.3 million clients have traded during the last 12 months in commodity. और ये growth 60 से 70% के आसपास है year on year. It is something which is positive. And I was seeing some of the questions posted in the chat box where people were asking how do we decide which commodity to trade on which exchange, whether I should trade on MCX, I should trade on NSE. I mean, for that, you normally tend to see whichever contract is having higher market depth and liquidity in a particular exchange. I think you can choose. And I think both NSE and MCX and even NCDX are working hard to bring in contracts, and that benefit the overall audience, not just traders but investors as well as the value chain. So you can simply check the contract you want to trade in, and मार्केट डेप्थ आपको देखने को मिल जाता है, और उसके बेसिस पे आप आपका ट्रेड बना सकते हैं. थोड़े बहुत थम रूल्स जो आप इक्विटी डेरिवेटिव्स में यूज करते हैं, स्टॉप लॉसेस, टारगेट्स, रिस्क रिवॉर्ड, ये सब चीजें यहाँ पे लगाना पड़ता है. बट आई एम सीइंग सिग्निफिकेंट ग्रोथ इन ओवरऑल इंडस्ट्रियल मेटल कॉन्ट्रैक्ट परफॉर्मेंस इन बोथ फ्यूचर्स एंड ऑप्शन कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स ऑन दी एक्सचेंजेस.
Right. So just as a follow-up question, अगर इसको improve करना है तो so do you think that if the exchanges launched options on the mini contracts, it will be helpful, and especially copper doesn't have a mini contract, so would that be helpful?
No, absolutely. I think we have mini contracts in bullion. We have options on mini contract in bullion, and not just bullion, even in the energy segment, we have mini contract and subsequent option contracts available there. तो मुझे लगता है yes, अगर mini contracts आते हैं futures और उनके ऊपर options भी आते हैं, it will add value to the retail participant. Because क्योंकि prices contract के बढ़ रहे हैं, तो even if you pay 10% of the contract value as a margin, कॉपर का अगर वैल्यू एक लॉट का 30 लाख का होता है, तो 30 लाख का 10% इज 3 लाख रुपीज और 5 लाख रुपीज. तो 3 से 5 लाख रुपए इन्वेस्ट करना एक साधारण रिटेल इन्वेस्टर के लिए चैलेंजिंग होता है. तो इफ देर इज अ ऑप्शन ऑफ मिनी कॉन्ट्रैक्ट, then a client maybe with 30,000-40,000 rupees or 50,000 rupees can participate in a future contract. However, ऑप्शन कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स का होना एक एडवांटेज है, क्योंकि वहां पे आप प्रीमियम पे करते हैं. तो इफ यू डोंट हैव 3 लाख रुपीज और 4 लाख रुपीज, पॉसिबली इफ यू आर बुलिश ऑन अ कॉपर कॉन्ट्रैक्ट, आप कॉल ऑप्शन ऑफ कॉपर आप बाय कर सकते हो, जहां पे मार्जिन और द प्रीमियम दैट यू पे विल बी 25,000-30,000 rupees. So having options is enabling retail to participate in industrial metals, even though the contract size is big. But introducing mini contracts and subsequent options on mini contracts will further add value, and it will also include a lot of small participants to have exposure to these contracts.
So right, and in fact, एक और मैं just insight I would like to share here कि like currently on the exchanges, base metals का जो contract है, that is delivery based. So when we have spoken to the value chain participants, जो है basically the commercial जो इसका use में है, hedgers है, they actually said that they would prefer a cash settle contract. So you think that having two kinds of settlements would actually make sense? एक cash settle which is linked to LME, और दूसरा जो current kind of contract है?
Yes, I see innovation is something which is happening over a period of time. If we look at it 2003 onwards, 2026, 23 years down the line, we have seen a lot of things happening. Like initially there were only regular contracts, then exchanges realized ki yes, we can bring in mini contracts. So they innovated and they brought in mini contracts. And over a period of time, they also improvised on launching option contracts and also settling their deliveries, and the devolvement process is slightly different. The options here devolve into a future contract if the option closes in the money. Out of the money है तो cash settle हो जाता है. So a lot of innovation is happening, and there is a regulation by the regulator where the commodity contracts that we have, they need to settle in physical, right? I mean, because they wanted to have a clear cut demarcation that the contracts that are available for trading, they have the possibility of delivery if somebody wants to, right? Energy, since crude oil or natural gas are the only two contracts which are settled in cash, because they are imported in a regulated manner, in a controlled manner. It is not openly available for all to import directly, right? तो वहां पे कैश सेटलमेंट है, बिकॉज एनर्जी आप स्टोर भी नहीं कर सकते हो प्रॉपर्ली, राइट? जबकि आप मेटल्स वगैरह आप वॉल्ट में स्टोर कर सकते हो, आप वेयर हाउस में स्टोर कर सकते हो अगर इंडस्ट्रियल मेटल है तो उस वजह से उन्होंने डिलीवरी का एक मैंडेट रखा है. आई एम श्योर regulator is also exploring things to build more liquidity in the contracts, and even exchanges are exploring ways to have more and more participation. So maybe over a period of time, if the industry value chain is requiring this, and if there are logical inputs to have a cash settle contract, then they may certainly consider. But as of now, barring energy contracts, we have almost all commodities. They are deliverable. So let's see, the time will tell, and such suggestions will obviously add value to exchange, and exchange will also explore, and even regulator will consider a few things, and they may come out with some innovation over a period of time.
So people from the exchange or regulators, if you are watching, the suggestion is here. So before I come to Chandrasekhar ji, I'll just there is a question from Ms. Palak. She's actually asking. So this relates to actually doing short-term trading. So I'll just take the liberty to answer it. She's basically saying, okay, we understand the long-term structural story, but how do you basically use that in day-to-day trading? See, when you are doing day-to-day trading, it doesn't matter if it's copper, Bank Nifty, or Reliance. What matters is the approach has to be very short-term, and the tools have to be appropriate for the short-term. इसका मतलब है कि आपका technical analysis पे importance will be max. So it's like जो fundamentals होता है, जो intermarket होता है, वो medium से लॉन्ग टर्म के ऊपर काम करता है, बट दे ऑल्सो गिव यू पर्सपेक्टिव. समटाइम्स इवन शॉर्ट टर्म ट्रेडिंग अपॉर्चुनिटीज कैन कम इन फ्रॉम अ फंडामेंटल बैकड्रॉप और इंटर मार्केट बैकड्रॉप. बट जनरली आप अगर एक दो दिन के लिए, इंट्राडे के लिए आप अगर ट्रेडिंग करते हो, जो डेरिवेटिव्स मार्केट का पैटर्न है, वहां पे योर टेक्निकल एनालिसिस विल बी द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग, बिकॉज प्राइस एक्शन इज गोइंग टू बी एक्सट्रीमली इंपॉर्टेंट, बिकॉज सेंटिमेंट will create exaggerations on either side. So that has to be there. So risk management has to be there. आपको अगर long term invest करना है, then the tool has to be appropriate. I cannot take a 15-day expiry futures and expect to play a 10-year cycle. So it has to be appropriate in that regard. So I'll now come back to Chandrasekhar ji. So Chandrasekhar ji, actually when I look at...
Can I
Yeah,
make
sure.
a follow-up comment on what Sunil said?
Sure.
That there are increasing inquiries about industrial metals, increasing interest amongst the market participants about industrial metals. I think this is a very positive sign, but it should not just remain increasing interest, should get converted into trades, which is very important. And that is why, in my view, it is so critical that the brokerage houses like Kotak or even the exchanges have to engage with the stakeholders, particularly those in the real economy, who are either producers or consumers or importers and exporters of these industrial metals. And again, pardon me saying, the communication to them should not be a marketing communication saying you are facing a risk. I have a product, please come and hedge. No, I think we need to actually educate them about this market. We need to educate them about the risks that they are facing, and we need to teach them how to use this as a tool to hedge their price risk. Because currently, my belief, with due respect to everybody, is that it is going more as a marketing pitch to sell a product or a service, whereas it fits genuine education, and it will take time. But I'm sure people will be a lot more convinced, and they'll come into the market. This is my view. But I think somebody has to take this forward, and I'm sure all of us can pitch in. Yeah.
Absolutely, I concur with you because unlike the other commodities, in case of base metals, a lot of these value chain participants, they actually end up hedging abroad, which is the element, because
Exactly.
their reference price. So when we interacted with them, a large chunk of them, their common need was that give us a contract which is in rupees, settled in India, but completely linked to LME in a cash settled format. I think, yeah. So we are hopeful that somebody from the regulator side is watching or will watch it in a recorded format and will take the action because we are quite bullish on the overall commodity market. Now I'll come to the copper market outlook. I have a little twisted question. So considering a couple of questions which have come from the audience, I'll just blend all of them into my question. Is that when I look at the copper market, it looks like a mismatch between a microscope and a telescope. In the way I'll explain that, yes, when I look through a telescope, the next 10-15 years, the structural story of, if I want to use just one word, deglobalization एक तरफ, और उसके साथ जो AI, जो इलेक्ट्रिफिकेशन, जो एनर्जी में एक शिफ्ट हो रहा है फ्रॉम द ट्रेडिशनल एनर्जी टुवर्ड्स
renewables.
Towards the renewables, and plus the declining ore grade, etc. But अभी अगर मैं उसको short term में देखता हूँ through the microscope, the inventory situation, especially if I add up all the exchanges, it is still at significantly high levels. So generally, what we tend to see historically is that अगर prices में एक structural bull run है, तो inventories are drawn down. So there is a disconnect. You have answered that by saying that yes, a lot of hoarding is happening, which is being done by deep pocket guys, like either the government or even the large private sectors. But it looks a little uncomforting. Means at one point in time, so has the metric completely changed of looking at the copper market? We have to completely ignore the exchange inventories and just believe in the long-term story to invest in it.
You're asking me? Or
Yes. I'm asking you.
No, I think that the exchange inventories are always such an important factor that market participants all the time watch. There's no doubt at all whether it is LME or Shanghai, whatever exchange. I think and the changes in the inventory levels do influence prices, and therefore to answer your question, inventory levels at the exchanges are important, but they are not the sole determinants of price changes. Primarily, the price changes actually impact the inventory levels in the exchanges, and it's not the other way. For what is important is the certainty or uncertainty of supply and certainty or otherwise of demand. I think these are the two fundamental factors which will drive. But the level of inventory and the period which that inventory would cover, the number of days of use would actually matter as far as prices are concerned. So I think this is my take. Beyond that, I may not be able to comment.
Thank you, sir, for that insight. So we have come to the fag end of the discussion. So, sir, in case if you have any closing comments.
One closing comment I want to make, and I am happy to repeat it every time we meet, is that India's growth story is just about beginning to unfold. India's growth over the next 5, 10, 15, 25, 30 years is going to be continuously, year on year, is going to be commodity driven and commodity intensive. It is going to be driven by energy products. It is going to be driven by metals. It is going to be driven by agriculture commodities. And India will continue to remain major producer, major processor, major consumer, major importer or exporter of a wide range of commodities. And that's the real economy. Commodity economy is a real economy. And focus on that real economy, investment in that real economy, and the risks that emanate out of this real economy. Obviously, those risks can be hedged in the derivatives market. And the derivatives market is not only for hedging the price risk, but also is a vehicle for investment. I think that's the message we need to keep giving to our audience, our viewers, and the young population, which is going to unleash its productive forces in this country over the next 1, 2, 3 decades. They need to understand that here is a market which is waiting to be tapped. Here is a market which they can benefit from.
That's a very nice way of actually summing it up. It like is to all the young people over there, you are sitting at an inflection point. Focus
Yes.
on the real things, because even if you're making a financial bet, it will be ultimately on the real stuff. So the real economy, the real sectors like commodities might actually edge just the financial sectors and the financial so-called just pure financial derivatives. So I'll just come to Sunil for your closing comments about what do you think about the prospect for traders in MCX or NSE, the commodity ecosystem?
So, I mean, my closing comment is simple. See, India is among the top, fastest growing economy, you can say, and you can say India will be the next big thing. Maybe if you look at it from the next 15 to 20-year growth story perspective, and industrial metals, they play a vital role. And as Chandrasekhar ji also mentioned, we are among the top producers, we are among the top consumers, and we are the most populous country in the world. So industrial metal will play a vital role in pushing India to the heights where we expect India to be seen after 15-20 years. For the traders, I would say yes, people who have exposure to derivative markets in India, in equity especially, if you want to leverage the availability of commodity derivative contracts after 330, certainly आप commodity markets को explore कर सकते हैं. आपका जो नो हाउ है डेरिवेटिव मार्केट्स का, आप कमोडिटी में भी यूज कर सकते हैं. ऑब्वियसली बाय डूइंग द बेसिक ड्यू डिलिजेंस आप स्टॉप लॉस वगैरह लगा के आप काम कर सकते हैं. एंड मोर इम्पोर्टेंटली मेरा क्लोजिंग रिमार्क वैल्यू चेन पार्टिसिपेंट्स के लिए रहेगा. People who are managing their price risk currently through international commodity exchanges, I think they should, this is the right time to, come back to India and explore the derivative contracts which are already available. Market depth bhi acha hai. We talked about the number of volume that we are talking about in industrial metals. It is growing. You have the variety of future and option contracts. तो मुझे लगता है कि उनका यहाँ पे आना थोड़ा important है. We have seen a lot of value chain participants already having exposure in the Indian market, but we being such a huge country, मेरे ख्याल से अगर 50-60% भी लोग अगर डोमेस्टिक मार्केट में हेज करना शुरू करेंगे तो ओवर अ पीरियड ऑफ टाइम आई थिंक इंडियन एक्सचेंजेस विल आल्सो बिकम अ प्राइस मेकर एंड देन इंटरनेशनल एक्सचेंजेस विल स्टार्ट referring to Indian exchanges also the way we currently refer foreign exchanges, right? So my suggestion or closing remark is to request all the value chain participants to have some exposure in the domestic market as well to make this market big and worthwhile.
So that was a very exhilarating and exciting. We have covered a lot of things in this discussion. Thank you, gentlemen, for sharing your insights, and thank you all for all the viewers for being here today and participating in our discussion through your questions. If you have any suggestion about कि जो हम लोग का next webinar होने वाला है, आपको क्या लगता है कि हम लोग को कौन सा topic cover करना चाहिए? Because we have covered a lot of ground on commodities, bullion, energy, and today base metals. So if of course agri commodity एक space है जहाँ पे we can focus on, because the monsoon season is about to start. So just give your suggestions, your valuable insights into the comment box, and we would love to see what we can do about them. So thank you all and have a fantastic weekend ahead.
Thank you.
God bless. Thank you.
Investments in securities market are subject to market risks. Read all the related documents carefully before investing.